We begin this edition bringing you the latest from the talks in Oman between the United States and Iran. That's over Tehran's nuclear program. Mediated by Oman, the meeting has involved U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Araghchi says the talks got off to a good start, but Tehran has insisted that they focus only on nuclear issues, rejecting discussions on missiles or regional influence. Iran signaled flexibility on uranium enrichment while demanding sanctions relief. Meanwhile, Washington imposed fresh sanctions on several entities and the shadow oil fleet of Iran as both sides returned home to consult further. Here's just a reminder of some brief comments by Araghchi after the talks.
As a whole, I can say that it was a good start, but whether we can continue this depends on consultations in the capitals and decisions to be made there.
Joining us to unpack this further from London is Dr Burcu Ozcelik, a senior research fellow for Middle East security at RUSI, specializing in the MENA region, Turkey and the Eastern Mediterranean. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr Ozcelik. In terms of Iran, they're insisting that the talks only cover the nuclear program. They've rejected discussions on missiles or any regional activities. How realistic is this kind of stance in achieving the aims and getting a lasting deal over the line with the United States if this is the only focus?
Well, I think the strategic mistake or miscalculation that Tehran might possibly be making at this current moment is a failure to recognize that the operating environment and the diplomatic strategic environment, in fact, has changed significantly since the 12-day war last June. So arguing that the negotiating position, the file, should be narrowly focused on the nuclear issue, I think might be a misreading by Tehran, both in terms of what the U.S. is willing to agree to, and as well as what the United States might be willing to, the risk it might be willing to take on militarily. We've been seeing, of course, over the past few weeks, an intensified surge in U.S. military asset buildup in the Gulf. And this is very much situated within the broader context, I think. This is worth noting, of President Trump's peace through strength approach, which is the idea that military and diplomatic tracks can unfold, can go forward in parallel. And so there might be some confusion at the moment, or some ambiguity rather, about what the desired U.S. end state is with respect to what it wants to see happen in Iran. But I think both sides are trying to assess what each other's thresholds are and risk appetite as they enter into what looks like a possible new round of negotiations. But I think the big question is how long President Trump is willing to wait before they are able to arrive at some kind of deal that the Americans will be able to live with at this stage.
What do you think that threshold is? I mean, we've already seen the United States respond just during or even just after the talks with a fresh round of sanctions on some Iranian entities and the shadow fleet. What does that tell us about the intentions of Washington and how much movement there is and how much patience they have?
I think those sanctions will have been planned for some time. The announcement by OFAC, I think, in the Treasury is significant that it comes today. And it's a culmination of ongoing the U.S. policy of maximum pressure, that yes, we're at the negotiating table, but at the same time, we are not easing off on increased sanctions enforcement and new fresh sanctions on the Iranian regime. So it's very much a comprehensive package of actions and activities that the United States is placing on Tehran. There are various levers of pressure here: diplomatic, economic, and military. And combined, I think the attempt is to try to extract some strategic, painful concessions from the Iranian regime that will take this in a very different direction than what Tehran was previously willing to agree to. I don't think President Trump has a long timeline ahead of him. I think he would prefer to arrive at a decision sooner rather than later. And there is, of course, a cost to keeping its military assets in the Gulf. The U.S. cannot commit its resources there indefinitely. So there will be a moment where the decision has to be made. It's just a question of whether Tehran is prepared to acknowledge that and understand that their negotiating position is far diminished at this moment.
You mentioned those painful concessions, and that's quite a critical word there, painful, because I wonder how much pain Tehran is willing to endure in terms of its uranium enrichment concessions at this point. They seem to be showing some flexibility, but it could just be talk at this stage. What is your reading into it?
That's a really important question. I think at this moment, perhaps counterintuitively, I don't think the most painful concession is going to be on the nuclear file. Since last June's war, we've seen a significant rollback of Iran's nuclear capabilities. It hasn't been a wholesale eradication of Iranian nuclear capabilities by any means, but I think the attacks on key nuclear facilities by the United States did have a significant impact. And that's why right now, from Tehran's point of view, whilst yes, some concessions on the nuclear issue seem feasible, what really Tehran does not want to give up on is its right to its ballistic missile program. And that is key, of course, for the United States and especially for Israel and other allies in the region as well. It's the ballistic missile program, as well as Iran's support for armed non-state actors or proxies, its axis of resistance across the region. And there specifically, we're talking now about Hezbollah and the Houthi movement in Yemen. So Iran has indicated already over the past week that it was only willing to negotiate on the nuclear issue. I don't think that that is a sufficient benchmark for success anymore where we are today since the events of the past, the environment since the post 7th of October, and certainly since the 12-day war in June.
And you mentioned that environment. Just a quick last question in terms of the local pressures on the Iranian government following the massacres that we saw in the protests recently. Just how much is that going to play in terms of the talks to come as things stand, if they don't visit other problems like the missiles and further regional instability like that?
That's right. So Iran is facing a unique constellation of pressures, both externally from the international community, chiefly the United States, and domestic pressures as well. We mustn't forget the unbelievable brutality with which the Iranian regime attacked its own civilians, killed those in the thousands since the demonstrations broke out late December last year. And the fact that President Trump pledged some form of support to Iranian civilian demonstrators by saying that help is on the way. I think it will be very difficult for the U.S. administration to walk away from that and to be seen as having not taken any action at this stage in defense of Iranian protesters. At the same time, I do not believe that it's a vital U.S. national interest to promote regime change at this very moment. But Iran, again, is operating under a different strategic environment because its legitimacy has eroded even further following its attacks on Iranian civilians on the streets of Tehran and elsewhere in the country as well.
Dr. Burcu Ozcelik, thank you so much for laying that out for us. And on that note, tomorrow evening, our reporters will be bringing you exclusive coverage from Iran, revealing the human stories behind that deadly crackdown. From the streets where protests erupted to the hospitals and morgues, we'll be showing how families and survivors lived through the nation's darkest days under a blackout. So please don't miss this rare documentary telling the first-hand accounts of those who witnessed the horror and the resilience of a people fighting to be heard. That's Iran Massacre Under a Blackout, and it's coming to your screens just after 10 p.m. Paris time on Saturday.
On social media, you could see